The next one, act like an ant. Act like an ant. Point number one, why observe the ant? Some of you may have heard me tell this story. It's been a while, though, I think. When I was in graduate school, I loved studying, and I loved, trying to figure things out. I went to lots of training, and I ate books and ate theoretical stuff, and I just loved the field, and I just could not get enough of it. And that was kind of one of the good things that I had going for me, because I just loved the field of study that I was in, and I pursued it very, very, very diligently. One of the things I did not have going for me at that time was that if a task were not very structured from the outside, I tend to be the kind of person who has more ideas than I can put into piles. And so I end up with a lot of piles, and I don't really think a lot of times about the linear path that it's going to take to get all that done. And so I was fine through all my years in school. I mean, I always made, good grades and succeeded in school and all that sort of thing. But what I didn't really ever realize, because I thought, getting a PhD would be a breeze because you just go to school. I've done that, right? What I didn't ever realize was the reason that I had been successful in school, in part, was that it was pretty structured, right? You got a class, you got a semester, the assignment's given out, they give you a syllabus, you got the test, when the test is coming, you can, party most nights, but not the last night. And I know how the game works, right? But it was very structured and it was there. And so I could sort of do that for however many years that was, 16, 20 years. Here's what happens, though. When you're pursuing a doctorate, you go through that, and then you go on your internship, and all this stuff is structured, and you can do very well if you apply yourself and are diligent. And then there's this black hole called a dissertation. And a dissertation is basically an assignment where they say, do one, and it's got certain, requirements to it. It's got to be a certain length, and it's got to be in a topic nobody's ever researched before, and blah, blah, blah. But you've got to complete it, and then they give you this date, like 8 years out from the time that you first enrolled. Now, if you're a person that has little sense of linear structure, and you have this big global task that looks like climbing Mount Everest, write a dissertation. Now, to me, it is a joke, and it just shows how you can change. I don't care how screwed up you are. This proves you can change. I've written 20 books. A dissertation is that big compared to a book, and I looked at a dissertation at that time, and it looked like this big, and I was stalled out, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I just write a dissertation. The whole thing was so overwhelming to me. Because you got this no structure, no teachers, nobody breathing down your neck, no path, no way to do it, just 8 years out it's supposed to be done. Well, first of all, if you're a procrastinator, 8 years seems like eternity. So step one for me, 8 years later, write a dissertation, is get a tea time. Some of you aren't golfers, you didn't get that. I mean, that seems like forever away, forever. I've got 8 years to play golf, and then I got to worry about this homework assignment, was how it seemed like, to me. The point is that it seemed not only way out there, but it also seemed totally overwhelming, and that's the bigger point. I just did not see how anybody got something like that accomplished. And every time I would think about it, it would seem so big that there was no way to think about it. I mean, I just couldn't even think about it. I'd go play golf. I couldn't think about it or avoid it in some other way. And actually, what I tended to do was not play golf. What I tended to do was pour myself into the studies that I loved and the things that I was passionate about, right? But I was stalled out. And then what happens is, after the years go on, they start to send you these little warning slips, which basically mean that you can go to graduate school for 4 years, complete an internship, and never get a degree. And that costs a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of brain damage. A lot. So I started to get these warning slips, right? And I'm looking at them, and now I know I'm in trouble. So I did what I always do when I'm in trouble. I prayed. And I asked God for a dissertation. And God said, do something, right? I asked God for a dissertation. And you know what he told me? He told me to go read a specific chapter in the book of Proverbs. Now, I didn't know what that chapter was. I didn't know what it was about. But I got led to this specific chapter. And here is the chapter. Here's what it says. Go, sluggard. Okay. It says, go and observe the ant. Observe the ant. Who, having no chief officer or ruler over it, in other words, nobody's managing the ant, goes and stores up its food in the summer and something establishes its crop or something by the winter. In other words, go watch the ant, because nobody's over the ant, and the ant manages to pull this off. And I'm going, thank you, God. Boy, that just solves the problem, doesn't it? When I thought about ants, the best thing you can do with ants is raid them, right? But I'm on this spiritual trek, and I believe that God has done this. So I'm looking at this and going, how does that equal a dissertation? There's nothing in that passage that would write a dissertation for me, but I'm going to be obedient. And I'm going to be obedient because I'm going to prove God wrong, and then I'm justified in being mad at him, right? So I go, fine, I'll go look at the ant. So how do you observe an ant? Well, how do you observe an ant? Throw crumbs out on the table and leave them there? Well, that seemed not like a good idea. So I was sharing this with a friend, and she bought me an ant farm. I thought, great, that's a great idea. I'm going to observe the ant the right way. I got an ant farm, a real live ant farm. So here's what they do. They send you this ant farm in the mail. No, I'm sorry. You can buy them at stores. I get the ant farm, I unpack it, I set it up. And then you have to order the ants, because I guess ants have a shelf life. So you order the ant, right? The ants come in this little tube. You open up the ants, and they're like tired from the trip, and they're like, trying to. And first you pour the sand in the thing, and then you pour the ants in there, and they fall out of it. It's sort of like skydiving, and they hit the sand, and then they don't do anything. So I'm looking at the ants. Well, great observation of these ants. Not a lot's happening. So I sort of am getting a little spiritual fatigue at this point, and I kind of blow it off. Well, but I'm supposed to be watching the ants. So I watch them, and I notice in a couple of days they're sort of waking up and kind of finding their way and walking around, but I don't see a dissertation. And so I'm, sort of continuing to watch them. And what I notice is what the ant did, or the ants, but all of them were the same, they would pick up a little grain of sand, right? And they've got these little, I don't know what they've got, these little armsy things. And they'd pick it up, and they'd hold it right here, and then they'd start to go like this. And across this ant farm, it's only this far. But when you're this big and you're carrying this thing and you're going like this, we're talking from here to Sacramento or something. And what they do, they just pick up this one little grain and they do this little thing and they take it all the way over here and then they would drop it. And then they'd start to go back. They wouldn't even pick one up on the way home. They would just go back and then they would pick up another grain. And then they would do this little thing. And so I'm going, this is bizarre. And so I go on a vacation. That's what I do when I'm in crisis. I go on a vacation. I come back, and it's amazing. These ants have built a city while I was gone. And there's tunnels and McDonald's and windmills. And this thing is coming to life, and they're scurrying around and this, that, and the other. And then it hit me when I asked the question, how did they do this? how did this appear? Because all they did was they just picked up a little grain and they started to sort of, and I go back to God and I go, how does all this apply? And basically, here is the answer. An ant can't build a city. Tell an ant to build a city, they go, what? Tell an ant to pick up a grain of sand and move it, and they can do that. If they pick up a grain of sand and move it, and they pick up another grain of sand and they move it, and they pick up another grain of sand and they move it, after a couple of weeks while the boss is on vacation, they've built a city. And then it hit me. I can't write a dissertation any more than an ant can build a city. It's too big. It's way too big. But what are the grains of sand? I started to break it down. What are the grains of sand to a dissertation? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to have a committee. What's a committee? It's 3 faculty members that will agree to oversee the process and tell you where you're all screwed up and go back and try harder. How do you get 3 faculty members? Well, you go take a faculty member to lunch and ask him to be on your committee. I could eat lunch. I'm capable of picking up that grain of sand. I talk to faculty all the time. I played golf with a bunch of them. So that's one. Okay, I'll ask so-and-so to go to lunch with me and see if he'll be on my committee. I can do that. Okay, what's the next thing you do? Well, you have to pick a topic. Well, how do you do that? You go do a literature search in the library about all the things that have been written in a specific area, and you see kind of what that's about. And I go, well, I go to the library all the time. I live at the library. I can do that. Then what do? Well, then you've got to pick one, and you've got to create a research design for it. Well, I've created 1,000 research designs in 32 graduate hours of statistics. We did that all the time. I can do that. Continue to go down the list, and what I found was I can't write a dissertation, but there wasn't a grain of sand that I couldn't pick up. So I just started to obey what I thought God was saying, picking up one grain of sand at a time. Long story short, 6 months later, I have a dissertation sitting in front of me. I can't write one of those, but I can pick up a grain of sand. And the magic about that is then they called the idiot doctor. I mean, this is, what a country. You know, this is amazing. And here's the reality of it. Everything that anybody ever accomplished that you look at and you think is impossible, you think it's so big, that's how they did it. That's how they did it. Bill Gates built Microsoft one line of code at a time. People build a portfolio of clients one phone call at a time. There's people lose 150 pounds, 1 pound at a time. And here's what is true, and I'm telling you, it is the gospel truth. Anybody that ever did anything did it that way. And the ones who didn't do it that way, they lose it. Go do a study or read up sometime on second-generation wealth. People that inherit a lot of money. Or I'll give you another example, the lottery winners. I don't know what, I remember when I was writing the book, I looked it up, but it's something like 2/3, I think it's around 2/3 of people who win the lottery, and I don't know exactly what the time period is, I think it's like 2 years. 2 years later, they're bankrupt. Win millions, and they're bankrupt. See, when you get it all at once, and it's not done one grain of sand at a time, then you're not the person who can sustain it. That's the problem with the instantaneous falling in love. How many people, you go interview everybody that ever got divorced and ask them, were you ever head over heels in love? And except for the ones who married for, to get in the country or something, that happens. I talked to somebody the other day that said that. The rest of them will tell you, oh yeah, I was smitten. I was absolutely in love. And you start to, we had 3 calls on the radio show today. Horrible scenarios. Were you in love? Yeah, we were absolutely in love. How long did you know him before you married him? 4 months. 8 months. And I forget the other one. Probably 6. It's in between. But the point is, something quickly is not, and like all at once, is not the way that it generally happens. So point number 2 says this: it's all small. There are no big things. They're all small things. Tiger Woods has done some big things. Won however many majors now, and how much money, and how many tournaments, and this, that, and the other. And we look at this incredible, enormous record that he has amassed. That's not what happened. What happened was a little bitty kid went out and hit one practice ball at a time. Went and played one round at a time. Year after year after year after year. And what happened was all of that continued to grow. When you look out there at someone, for example, who has a good relationship, we think, gosh, they're just meant for each other, and sometimes that's true, and they're so compatible, and it's such a good match. But when you put the microscope on it, this relationship didn't just fall out of the sky. If they've been together for a number of years and it's good, what you see that relationship came from wasn't the instantaneous, mythical falling in love. That might have happened, but where the relationship came from that's still standing after however many years, it came from one conflict resolution at a time. It came from one act of kindness at a time. It came from one sacrificial act at a time. It came from one delay of gratification at a time. Day after day after day, this tapestry of love was weaved one stitch at a time. And those are the people who have good relationships, and those are the people whose relationships last. But what everyone else does who don't is they look at that and they think, I want that, and it's a fantasy, and they think that you go to the store and you buy that. I'm a golfer, and so it's always funny to me to see these people who've never played before, who take it up, and they've been good at other sports, and they think, well, I'm going to go be good at this, and they go spend all this money on all this new equipment, this, that, and the other, and they go to take a lesson, and they think like they go sign up with the pro, and he's just going to, give them that, give them this ability, and give them this kind of magic whatever. And what they find is it doesn't work that way, and they hit the first shot, and it goes behind them. And they find out, gosh, this is a new thing. I can't just, place out of this course on my past achievements. It's still done one grain of sand at a time. So if you can learn this, what you begin to learn is you can almost do anything. Once you learn that anything is just composed of a bunch of little small things. When you learn that the big things are all small, that's a big difference, unless you are beset by the two following diseases. Number one is, let's put up the next 2 points. Not number one, but the next one would be that you want it all. That you want it all. The one after that, which is its cousin, is I want it now. Let me give you an example. I was talking to this lady who was bummed out about her dating life, and she came in and she said, all right, I'm ready to get serious about this. It's not going well. She said, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get back in shape. And that was a big deal for her because she had sort of, in a lot of ways in her life, sort of, quote, proverbially gotten out of shape. And her thing was that she just sort of had this, men should love me unconditionally. And I said, that's nice, but unconditional approval of what's going on in your life isn't showing up. And so maybe you should do something. And so she kind of got with the program. And what happened was she was all motivated. And she says, Well, my friend, Susie or somebody, is on this new diet, and she lost, I forget the number, on this liquid diet, and it's really, really fast. She said, I'm committed and I'm going to do this. I said, I believe you, and it's not going to work. She said, yes, it does work. I said, oh, I believe you that it'll work. You'll lose it, but in 6 months, you'll be right back here, and you'll have put it back on. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm committed this time. I said, haven't you done this before? She said, yeah, but this time I'm committed. No, you're not. You may be committed to do it, but you're also committed to the same way that doesn't work. The same way that doesn't work is to want it all and want it now. And I said, here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that not only will you not change your life that would sustain it. Who cares if you win the lottery? You're going to be bankrupt if you haven't changed your life and gotten it in the right way. You're not going to be able to manage it either. But that's really not what scares me. What scares me is that as you are doing it the right way, if you were to lose it the right way, which is about a pound or so a week. She goes, what? I said, yeah, that's a good number, a pound or two a week. She goes, a week? That would take me, she starts doing the math, however many months before I'm at my goal weight. I said, exactly. That's how long it would take. Now, here's what I fear for you, and this is why you're going to fail. Isn't it nice to go to a psychologist, get all this affirmation? I said, here's why you're going to fail. Because you are so invested in wanting it all. All that matters to you is that you are that ideal weight. Now, you be honest with me. Is that true or not true? She said, that is all that matters. I've got to get at that ideal weight because then my life's going to work. I said, well, let me tell you what's going to happen. You are going to work your butt off. And you're going to deprive yourself, and you're going to put all this energy into it, and you're going to hate your life, but it's going to be good because you're going to lose this weight, and then a week or two into it, you're going to go stand on the scales, and it was here, and now it's gone to here. It's not gone to here. And you're going to look at that, and you've lost 2 pounds, and you're going to get so depressed and bummed out, and you're going to think, this is getting me nowhere, and you're going to order 14 pizzas. That's what's going to happen. And finally, she recognized, this is true. It's going to happen. I said, because you want it all. Now, here's what I suggest. You can have it all by not wanting it all. If the ant wanted the whole city, they'd move a grain of sand and go, nice city, and go commit ant suicide. I don't know how you do that. The funny ending of that story was one day I went on another trip and I forgot to turn the air conditioner off, and I came back and all the ants were like this. But they were good martyrs for a cause. I said, if you would forget, here's your problem. You got the wrong judge in your life. Let me give you the right judge. The wrong judge is your goal weight. See this all the time. The wrong judge is your goal weight, your ideal weight. It's a lousy judge. Here's your judge. Are you doing the small things and the simple things every day? You said, what's that? Are you capable of picking up the grain of sand of doing 30 or 45 minutes of a brisk walk every day? Yeah, of course I can do that. Okay, it's a small thing, it's simple. Are you capable of eating half of what you normally put on your plate, or 2/3, or cutting down your portion? Yeah, I'm capable of that. And I gave her a couple of small things. Okay, here's your judge. Each and every day, you judge yourself on, did you stick to the process and do the right things? Did you do your exercise a day? Did you do the little bitty things? Sort of like when you're going to build a portfolio, did you make the calls? Not how many big things did you sell, but did you make the calls? If you're going to build a savings program, did you make the deposit? Each grain of sand. That's how you judge yourself. Not by the goal, but are you picking up the individual pieces? And its cousin is, I want it now. I want it now. Not only am I judged by the big goal, but also I got to have it now. Let me give you an example. of a success story that proves the rule. Anybody ever heard of John Grisham? Yeah, the novelist. John Grisham, I don't know what the number is, but he sold I think it's 125 or 150 million books. I mean, that's just uncanny. The average book sells 10,000 copies in its lifetime. Now, think about that. How many people do you know that sit around in a life and think, I wish I could do A, B, C, or D, but I can't because I've got my life? John Grisham, if you've never heard this story, he was a small-town lawyer in Mississippi, Oxford, Mississippi. He was a state representative in the state legislature. His fantasy and his goal, or not a goal, but his fantasy and his passion, his dream, was he always wanted to be a writer. But he had a job. He was an attorney and he was a state representative. How do you do that? Well, if you want it all and you want it now, you don't. And you never become John Grisham, the novelist. But if you know the ant, you ask, how can I become a novelist? And you go and observe the ant, and you see one grain of sand at a time, having no chief officer or ruler over the ant. Here's what you do, and this is what he did. He wrote 1 page a day. 1 page a day for a couple of years, and that was a time to kill. And then he went and pushed that and tried to sell it. And I don't know the exact number. This is wrong, but it's something like this. He got rejected by 40-something publishers. One at a time. 1 page a day. Anybody can write a book. You can't write a page a day, double the time, write a half page a day. But the point is, nobody ever did anything big by any other method except that one. But if you want it all, and you want it today, you'll never have any, ever. And that was the temptation of original sin. Spiritual laziness, spiritual sluggardness. You can be like God today. Just eat this apple. Dial 1-800. Ingest this pill, and the pounds fall off. And not only that, a bikini grows where the pounds were. And if you call now, that's the way. And humans buy into this time after time after time. Sometimes, a couple more points, there are beliefs that get in your way, and you've got to learn to challenge these. Well, I could never do it. That's for other people. Or I'm stupid. Or I don't have the resources. Or I don't have the time. Figure out what stuff goes in your head to keep you stuck. And then your farms and your grains. I don't know what your farms are that you're trying to build, but I suggest you get a list. What are your farms? You want a good relationship? You want some sort of goal or dream or develop a skill or a hobby or a ministry or something else? Whatever that is. Figure out what your farms are. Don't just let life throw you out of an airplane, you land on some farm. That's the principle before about being dependent and not having a locus of control. You pick what your farms are. You figure out what your goals are. You figure out who God made you to be and what you want to accomplish. And then you stop looking at that as either insurmountable or unattainable, or something that can be had immediately and magically. And you start looking at that farm, whatever that goal is, a good relationship or some investment of your time and resources that has a return, you start looking at that farm as absolutely attainable and as attainable only by 1 grain of sand at a time. And then you figure out what those grains are, and you are likely to get there. Okay? Let's pray. Father, I just want to ask you those two things. One is, if there is someone here tonight that's never met you, I ask that you knock on the door of their house, their heart, right now, and let them know that you're calling them. And if you're hearing that, then just say, okay, God, I surrender. Lord Jesus, forgive me of being my own God and all of my imperfections and all my flaws and all my past, and I come to you to start anew and show me the way. And if you do that, that's all it takes to be on the program we've talked about. And God, I ask you for the rest of us who've known you for a while to show us the next step in creating the life in the aquarium that you've placed us in, whatever that is. Show us what our next move is. Empower us to do something. And then help us to do it one day at a time. In Jesus' name. Thank you.